The beginning is not the moment Nancy vanished from her bed. It is the exact second that porch camera glitched at 1:47 a.m. And the motion light flickered once, then died. Everything after that 41-minute window feels almost too clean. The pacemaker signal drops at 2:28 a.m. A ransom email demanding cryptocurrency lands with the media like clockwork. On the surface, it looks like a stranger broke in, grabbed an 84-year-old woman, and disappeared into the Arizona night. But something does not feel right, because that silhouette on the infrared did not stumble. It did not pause at the uneven ground or scan the shadows like a stranger would. The shoulders stayed loose. The stride stayed even, and that is when things changed. Behind closed doors, a SWAT commander stepped forward during the briefing and dropped the detail that quietly shifted the entire investigation. It was not the missing fingerprints. It was not the DNA. It was not even the ransom note. He said it was the walk. Trained operators can spot the difference between someone cautiously scouting a place in the dark and someone who already knows exactly where everything is. This figure moved like the yard was familiar territory. No hesitation at the steps. No extra glance at the doorframe. Just practiced confident motion that looked rehearsed weeks earlier. And here is where the story starts to feel off. Because if the kidnapper knew the layout that well, the circle of who could have done this suddenly shrinks. A lot. Investigators went back and pulled footage from January 11th. Same time of night. Same general area. A figure with the same build moving the exact same calm way. Not random. Not a first-time run. More like a dress rehearsal. What happened next was unexpected. They enhanced the infrared frames and caught a tiny, consistent outward rotation in one foot during every stride. Almost invisible. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Height estimates under the distortion put the person right around 5'9" to 5'10". But gait analysis does more than guess height. It shows proportion hip-width arm swing the way the torso stays stable. Suddenly, the question stopped being who was near the house that night. It became who moves like that, like they belong. Random home invasion? Maybe. Ransom for quick cash? Could be. Or something far more personal. Because strangers hesitate in the dark. Strangers misjudge distances. This person did not. And that single detail changes everything. But here is the problem. If he knew the property that well, the circle of suspects just got a lot smaller and a lot closer to home. That walk was mistake number one. Mistake number two happened on the road, and it was even quieter. After the camera died, investigators did not just stare at the yard. They looked outward at the roads, because every operation has two parts, the approach and the exit. And exits are where the pressure shows the cracks. Detectives mapped every realistic escape corridor leaving the neighborhood. They pulled license plate reader data, traffic cameras, private security feeds, even residential cameras that caught cars heading away in those early morning hours. What they found was not a vehicle speeding off in panic. No erratic turns. No sudden acceleration. Just one car moving calmly, efficiently along back roads, avoiding major intersections, like someone who knew the area inside out. And here is where things start to feel off. That same vehicle had already been seen in the exact same corridor on January 11th. Weeks earlier. Same late-night hours. Same calm speed. Not once, not random, but twice. 3 times and it becomes a pattern. Most other cars got ruled out fast. Night shift workers, delivery routes, ride-share logs. But this one drew deeper scrutiny, because a terrified kidnapper does not drive like he is heading home after a normal day. He drives like someone who has practiced the route. Investigators went further. They checked soil samples from tire treads, wheel wells, undercarriages. They looked at cell tower pings, even when phones were powered down. The patterns before and after the 41-minute window told their own story. Seat position measurements loosely matched the height range from the gait analysis, 5'9" to 5'10". Nothing conclusive on its own, but layered together it narrows. Random stranger kidnapping? Still possible. Professional crew after quick ransom cash? Could fit, but the calm exit, the repeated dry run, the backroad knowledge that starts to point somewhere much closer. Someone who had been around the property before. Someone who knew the neighborhood well enough to slip away without drawing eyes. What happened next was unexpected, because while the public stayed focused on the ransom email demanding cryptocurrency, investigators were quietly asking a different question. If this was really about money, why was the getaway so controlled? Why no chaos? Why no mistakes under pressure? Planning produces patterns, and patterns connect. The walk said familiarity. The drive said rehearsal, and both of them together made the circle of possibilities feel uncomfortably small. But the biggest clue was still waiting in the dark. Before the camera ever glitched, before the pacemaker signal dropped, there was a stretch of silence that may have revealed more than any footprint ever could. And that is when the psychology of this case gets truly uncomfortable. But the walk and the drive were only the first two mistakes. The third one was quieter. It happened in the waiting. Before that porch camera ever glitched at 1:47 a.m., before the motion light flickered and died, there was a long stretch of silence outside the house. Investigators now believe the suspect was already positioned nearby, watching the home settle into its night routine. And this is where things start to feel off, because middle-of-the-night abductions are almost never spontaneous. They need perfect timing. And perfect timing needs deep knowledge of how the house breathes after dark. Nancy was 84. She lived with habits you could almost set a watch to. Lights going out at the same hour. Television clicking off. Porch lights timing out automatically. Someone had to know exactly when that 41-minute window of vulnerability would open. How did he know she would be in that exact bedroom right then? How did he know no unexpected visitor or caregiver would pull up? How did he know the entry point would stay silent? That kind of patience, the relaxed shoulders while standing perfectly still. That is not how a stranger behaves in the dark. Strangers get restless. They shift. They second-guess. This person waited like he already understood the rhythm of the entire place. And here is the problem. That level of confidence usually comes from prior access or scouting so repeated it started to feel like ownership. Then came the ransom email. Calm, rehearsed, purely transactional. No frantic follow-ups. No pressure to keep the leverage alive. It did not match the usual pattern of someone desperate for quick cash. What happened next was unexpected, because when you stack the waiting on top of the practiced walk and the calm getaway, the picture stops looking like some random outsider grabbing a woman for money. It starts looking like someone who already had real access to Nancy's nightly habits. Someone inside the broader circle. Family, close friend, caretaker. Someone who knew the layout well enough to move without a single wasted second. And that detail changes everything. But the fourth mistake was still coming, the one the kidnapper never saw coming. He underestimated what the investigators had quietly built long before any of this reached the public. What do you think really happened here? Drop it in the comments because the funnel is closing fast. But the fourth mistake was the one he never saw coming. He thought he had erased himself completely. He underestimated the quiet grid the investigators had already built, long before the public even heard about the walk or the route. While the spotlight stayed on the ransom email, law enforcement had been doing something far more patient. They watched how people behaved when the cameras were not rolling. Family members cooperated, homes were searched, devices were pulled apart, vehicles were processed down to the smallest fiber. It looked like routine procedure. But it was strategic, because when everyone appears cleared on the surface, the real pressure builds in the shadows. Relaxed people make mistakes, and this suspect had relaxed. He assumed the silence after the demand would buy him time. What happened next was unexpected. Investigators started noticing the micro inconsistencies, the ones that do not scream on camera but whisper in the data. A phone that should have stayed stationary all night, suddenly showing movement patterns right before and after the 41-minute window. Activity logs that did not quite match the story of being asleep. Bluetooth connections dropping exactly when the timeline needed them to disappear. Devices formed their own silent witness network. And the suspect thought leaving his phone behind or powering things down would erase the trail. But the environment kept its own receipts. Road sensors logged the timestamps. Neighborhood cameras caught the light shifts. The same calm vehicle pattern that appeared weeks earlier now lined up too perfectly with the exit vector. No arrest has been made yet. The funnel is still closing slowly, deliberately. But the direction is no longer guesswork. He believed the darkness and the glitch would make him invisible. He believed the rehearsed calm would look random. He believed waiting in the dark like he belonged there would never raise questions about who already had access to Nancy's life. And that underestimation may have been the loudest mistake of all, because once investigators connect the walk, the route, the waiting, and the digital silence, the circle stops being wide. It becomes personal. And personal cases leave patterns that no mask can hide. The darkness hid his face that night. The camera glitch erased his features. But the walk, the drive, the waiting, and the silence, they all left patterns that no mask could cover. 3 visible mistakes on the surface. 1 invisible 4th mistake underneath. He rehearsed the approach. He practiced the exit. He waited like he already knew the ending, and he assumed none of it would ever connect. This was never random. Randomness does not rehearse weeks in advance. Randomness does not drive back roads like it is routine. Randomness does not stand perfectly still in the dark, waiting for the exact moment a house falls asleep. The funnel is closing. Search grids have tightened along those modeled routes. Behavioral notes keep stacking. And somewhere in that narrowing circle, someone is starting to feel the weight of every small decision they thought would stay invisible. You know what sticks with me the most about this one? It is how easily someone can move through another person's life with that kind of calm ownership. Makes you wonder what quiet details we all miss in the people we think we know best. Notebook V thanks you for watching. If this one left you with more questions than answers, I really appreciate you sticking around till the end. What single detail feels the most off to you right now? Drop it below and let's keep the conversation going.